Mike, glad you're with us today. I'm understanding that John Glenn, bless his heart, he's now 93 years old. John Glenn, the astronaut, has said something absurd, but you agree with his absurdity. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Tongue-in-cheek.
John Glenn is saying some pretty amazing things in the news. Many news outlets are covering this, by the way. I picked it up on Fox News, but he's all over the place. In an AP interview, he is saying that, I mean, he's not saying anything as glamorous as talking about his latest space trip. Well, how old is he now? He's like 90-something, right?
Yeah, he's 93 now, yeah.
Yeah, 93. So he's not. His last trip he did in space, he was 77, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's pretty
right.
amazing, right?
That is. That it was amazing. You got to, hats off to him on that. Yeah, he was 77.
Yeah. So, and he was 77. But when he was 77, from space, they interviewed him, and he said, "To look out at this kind of creation out here and not believe in God, to me, is impossible." Right.
Right. That's what he said
when
that's
he was
right.
77. Yeah. But now he's 93. His eyesight is fading.
Yeah, but he's older and wiser now. He's older and wiser now. Yeah, he's almost 20 years older. I mean, 77, he was just a child. What did he know?
Just a child. There you go.
What did he know? I mean, he's a wise old man now.
Right, yeah. But he's saying some things, and at first I didn't know what to make of it, because he said in an interview that he sees no contradiction between believing in God and believing in evolution.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, my first instinct was, wait a minute, now you've lost your mind, not just your hearing and your eyesight, right?
Right. Let me read to the folks what he says, and then you can comment on it, okay? He said, "I don't see that I'm any less religious by the fact that I can appreciate the fact that science just records that we change with evolution and time. And that's a fact," he says. Then he goes on to say, "It doesn't mean it's less wondrous, and it doesn't mean that there can't be some power greater than any of us that has been behind and is behind whatever's going on." That's what he said, quote, end quote. So let me translate that. Just because I said it's impossible not to believe in God doesn't mean that God couldn't have started it and then evolution took over, because evolution's a fact, and we all know that. That's what he said. Now go ahead.
Well, that really does seem to be what he's saying. In essence, I think he might be just worn out. Worn out by all these people saying evolution. Right. It's just
Settle
a
science.
never-ending.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a never-ending drone of who have been listening to me on your show. Will know this about me. I've been on sort of a crusade the past 20 years to take back the language.
Yes.
I've got satellite radio in my vehicle, and I do a lot of traveling, so I listen to a lot of radio. And one of my favorite stations on there is the Radio Classics. They play a lot of the old radio shows from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. The old Orson Welles stuff and all that.
Back when they were first talking about global warming, right?
The global warming, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing the moral standards back then, Carl. The juxtaposition is just shocking, really. But
I know.
They used to throw the words around like gay. They used to throw that word around a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, they play all the old commercials, like, "Your family will have a gay old time playing the latest game from Hasbro."
Yes.
That kind of language.
Yes.
And now there's been sort of this hijacking of words, to put a silk veneer over top of this activity that's going on, and it begins with using words like gay to justify, sexual depravity and immorality and so on. There was an article in the news today, by the way, and it's a little off topic, but there was an article in the news today of two men who were flirting with each other on the internet. They met. They got together intimately. They were talking about marriage. This was in England.
Yes,
they were They were even talking about getting married. And then one of the mothers of these two men noticed that one of the men looked eerily similar to the father with whom the mother has no relationship currently.
Yeah.
So they did some DNA testing. It turns out these two guys are brothers.
Yep. But they were being gay lovers through the internet and didn't even know that they were brothers.
Right.
Oh
right,
my gosh!
Exactly.
Sodom and Gomorrah is here, and of course Ted Cruz smacked down a reporter about that. But anyway, let's get back on the topic. So John Glenn,
Yes.
Says this about look, at 77, he's up in space, and he says it's impossible not to believe in God. Looking at this. Now at 93, right, with his eyesight leaving him and his hearing leaving him and his mind leaving him, he now says, well, I don't see why we can't believe in evolution, because evolution's a fact, and, God could have just kind of started it. So anyway, so he says that he thinks that evolution, the science of evolution, ought to be taught in schools. Now, you've got a spin on that. Give us your spin on it.
Well, in fact, this whole taking back the language, evolution simply means change over time, right?
Exactly.
But the evolution, when people hear the word evolution now, because now society has been conditioned to hear the word evolution and believe that we evolved out of the primordial slime billions of years ago. We crawled up out of the ocean one day, decided that, hey, we'd like to go for a walk. So we just grew legs and walked out of the ocean.
Right.
And that is the essence of evolution teaching, the deep time evolution, that fish turned into people. And yet there's no evidence for this, right? There's no evidence for this. All of the evidence points to people becoming people, fish becoming fish, dogs becoming dogs, cats becoming cats, et cetera, et cetera. And then we do a little digging here, and we find renowned atheist apologists like Richard Dawkins, right? Mm-hmm. And it's amazing what people will say, Carl, when they think that only their acolytes are in the audience.
Right. I know. I know where you're going with this. This is priceless, people. You got to hear this.
Right. So here we have Richard Dawkins, and Carl and I, folks, we don't just look at the Christian websites and all. We read scientific journals. We read the articles themselves. We look over Richard Dawkins' books and his material. And one day I was looking at his website. He has a quotations page, and one of the quotes is from his book, Climbing Mount Improbable. Mm-hmm. And the quote is this. It's a standalone quote. We're not quote mining his book or anything. He's got a series of quotes on his website, and this is one of them. Flowers and elephants are for the same thing as everything else in the living kingdoms, for spreading duplicate me programs written in DNA language. Flowers are for spreading copies of instructions for making more flowers. Elephants are spreading copies of instructions for making more elephants. So essentially what he's saying is exactly what the Bible's been saying for thousands of years, that everything reproduces according to its own kind. So if you and I are to say, if somebody walked up to you or I, Carl, you or me, and said, what does the Bible say? I've never read the Bible. What does the Bible say about how we got here? Well, listen, the Bible says that flowers and elephants are for the same thing. We would essentially quote Richard Dawkins because Richard Dawkins is essentially quoting the Bible, right?
Exactly. And he doesn't even know it. And listen, Mike, while you were quoting him, I jotted down 5 words that he used. And he says that this, how does it start off? Give me the first few words.
Okay, flowers and elephants are for the same thing as everything else.
All right, stop. All right, now watch this. Flowers and elephants are for. For indicates there's a purpose.
Right.
They're there for a reason. Then he goes on, and he talks about DNA is a program written in a language to make exact copies. Folks, listen to the creation language words that he's using. Now those words haven't been changed into total evolution words. So an evolutionist cannot even talk about evolution without using intelligent design languages. Nothing is for anything unless it has a purpose. Nothing has a program unless somebody has programmed it. Nothing has been written unless somebody has written it and authored it. No one uses language. Look up language. Look up language, folks. Language is a communication technique, an intelligent communication technique with a purpose between living things, and mainly we speak of people, but also and languages develop people. Only intelligence develops languages, and then he goes on to admit that DNA is a language written for a program that makes exact duplicate copies, which is not macroevolution, it's microevolution, it's speciation,
right,
which is a scientific fact and which the Bible confirms. So Dawkins, professing to be wise, has proven himself to be a creationist.
Well, listen, if we take this a step further, what are duplicates? Duplicates are exact copies, and he uses the word duplicate, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, if we look at a photocopier, and essentially what he's saying is that, one organism passes on its genetic instructions to the next generation. That's essentially what he's saying. Right?
Exactly.
And they're just photocopying each other. But if we go deeper into this, we see something happening that is also very biblical, and that is that since the fall, death entered into the world.
Right.
And when we look at a photocopy machines are designed to, you put a piece of paper in, everything that's on that paper is supposed to be transferred to a blank sheet of paper, and you have a duplicate, right? But eventually, over time, if you keep using the same original, the same template, eventually you see a deterioration in the copies.
Yes, they don't get better and better.
They don't get better and better. So there's a two-staged reality here in this comment from Richard Dawkins. He's confirming two very real biblical realities. One is that everything was created in its original template form, and everything is designed to reproduce according to its own kind. But we also see in the evidence, with the sort of a spiraling decay in biological organisms, with birth defects on the rise, cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if we don't stay on top of the bacteria and the viruses in the world, we'll all be dead within 100 years, right?
Yeah. Well, you're right. If we don't stay on top of those viruses, they'll soon become robots.
Robots.
I'm being funny. I mean, if you're an evolutionist, slime becomes man. Come on.
Oh, well, there you go. That's exactly right. So people would argue, well, when we say, if you throw all the parts required for a car into a junkyard and then watch a certain number of tornadoes go through, eventually a tornado will whip up a Mercedes, right? And they say, well, a Mercedes is not a living organism. Well, guess what? According to evolution theory, if you go back far enough, they have reasoned that at one time in the past, a non-living organism became life.
Yeah, which is absolutely impossible, has never been demonstrated, has never been able to be manipulated in controlled conditions. And besides, when someone uses that argument on me, well, you can't talk about a car in a junkyard because that's non-living. And I say, exactly, because a living thing, an ant, is 1,000,000 times more complex than a car in a junkyard. If you don't believe it, I can create a car for you, but you cannot create an ant for me.
That's right.
You understand? So you're right. You're right. It's only a non-living thing, and it can't be done. So how can a living thing be done when it's never been done before? You can't do it. No scientist has been able to do it. I can build a car. We can build a space shuttle. But you can't manufacture an ant. You can't make a bumblebee.
Do you ever wish that you could more powerfully, succinctly, and accurately speak to the message of your Christian faith and the Word of God? This is the book you need, The Magic Man in the Sky, Effectively Defending the Christian Faith. This book has been featured on TBN, Atlanta Live, dozens of radio programs, and hundreds of markets. It was rave reviewed by the Washington Times, and it was called a must-read book. Considering the times in which we now live, you need this book. Get it today on Amazon.com or the WND Superstore.